I'm Rolene Marks. This is the Israel Brief, brought to you by Lay of the Land, where we bring you those top stories making headlines every Monday to Thursday in Israel. So make sure that you don't miss out on your daily appointment with the Israel Brief. So let's take a look at those top stories. And yesterday, terror group Hamas, who control the Gaza Strip, released video footage of captive Israeli Avera Mengistu. Hamas are currently holding two Israelis captive, Avera Mengistu and Hisham al-Sayed, along with the remains of fallen soldiers Oron Shaul and Hadar Golden, who fell during battle during 2014's Operation Protective Edge. Now, speaking today on Israeli radio, the spokesperson of the IDF, Brigadier General Ran Kochav, said that the video had been examined by the security establishment, and their assessment was that it was reasonable to assume that this was Mengistu. They were very careful not to say that it is Mengistu, but that we could assume that it was Mengistu. If the video is indeed authentic, this will be the first sign of life of Avera Mengistu after many, many years. Now, last year, Hamas released video footage of the other captive Israeli, Hisham al-Sayed, who was believed to have been in poorly condition. We don't know his condition to date. Meanwhile, also speaking to Israeli radio, this time Kan Reshet Bet, former Prime Minister Yair Lapid weighed in on this, saying that his government, just like other Israeli governments, had tried to secure the release of the captive Israelis along with the remains of the soldiers, but said that a deal like the one brokered for captive soldier Gilad Shalit, who was released in 2011, that would see a certain amount of terrorists with blood on their hands, was not in the interest of Israeli security, explaining that this was a very, very difficult and complicated process. Meanwhile, many do and continue to lobby for international efforts to put the pressure on Hamas to release the remains of Shaul and Golden, as well as the captive Israelis. The last person to appeal for their release was His Holiness the Pope just a couple of weeks ago. We now go to another story, this time with the United Nations, and over 90 countries, including France, Germany, Japan, South Africa, and various others, have signed a letter appealing to Israel to lift sanctions that the new government have imposed on the Palestinian Authority. Now, this follows a resolution put forward at the United Nations General Assembly, which passed towards the end of last year, which will allow the International Court of Justice to weigh in on issues like what the Palestinians call annexation, occupation, and settlements. Now, the letter says that it doesn't matter where each country sits on the resolution. They say that punitive punishment is really not productive, and they express their concern about the possible collapse of the Palestinian Authority. Now, some of these sanctions include withholding tax money that would go towards paying for the salaries and the stipends of terrorists and their families, as well as withholding certain benefits for Palestinian Authority officials, including a travel ban for the foreign minister. Now, Israel's Foreign Minister Eli Cohen says that signatures and comments like this are meaningless, and Israel will do everything in our power to maintain the security of our citizens, and appealed to the countries to rather focus their efforts on stopping Palestinian incitement, which leads to terror and pay for slay. This is a story we will be following very, very closely. We have been speaking a lot about the Supreme Court in Israel and the ongoing crisis that is brewing should sweeping reforms be implemented. Now, I call it a crisis because this has been expressed by the legal fraternity, and it is also the opinion of many Israelis as well as the diaspora community. As always, views on the Israel brief are neutral and are no reflection of the broadcaster or the platform's own personal opinions. Meanwhile, President Herzog says he will continue to try and mediate between Supreme Court President Esther Hayut, who has expressed her frustration and her concerns, as well as newly re-elected Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who stands to gain the most with these sweeping reforms because it could curtail or put an end to his legal issues. And our final story, as always, we try to end on a positive note. This time takes us to Dnipro in the Ukraine. Israeli aid organization IsrAid announced earlier today that they had sent personnel to Dnipro that had been the victim of a devastating Russian missile attack. They have sent their psychotrauma units to give counseling to both first responders as well as families that have been severely impacted by these missile strikes. They've also sent food, blankets, medical supplies and other aid to the citizens of Dnipro, and IsrAid are proud to have been on the ground helping Ukrainians from the beginning of Russia's onslaught in February 2022. So that brings me to the end of today's edition of the Israel Brief. I do apologize for a slightly croaky voice, but just a reminder to check out our website at www.layoftheland.online. Our Facebook community is at Lottle site. Give us a like, a follow, and a share. Our YouTube community or our YouTube channel is at the Israel Brief. We love to think of you guys as our community, our family out there. If you haven't already subscribed, please hit the red subscribe button, and as always, like, share, and hey, invite your friends. And we don't mind comments if you want to comment on any of the stories that we have mentioned. And on Twitter, we are at Lay of the Land 5. And with that, with a slightly sinusy and croaky Rolene Marks, this is the Israel Brief, and I will be back tomorrow.